So they had the meeting last night. The deputy speaker brought in some people from the governor. And it's how do you feel about that? The concept of dissolving the village of Hempstead. Robert Bracey.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure, sharing this discussion with my brother in the struggle. The whole issue of dissolving the village, this is the second information session I've attended that's been sponsored, by this Long Island Civic Association or Neighborhood Civic with Lance and Roden. And the question I have remains, what's the purpose? What is the objective in talking about consolidation, dissolution, or anything? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And if it's a better village, I think that this particular process is one that shows us how unprepared we really are. Anytime you have people carrying a petition for a study or to petition us to do something like dissolving or consolidating and there's been no study, shows another example of us putting the cart before the horse. Most residents in this village are concerned with our quality of life, our high taxes, our poor services, and our devastated infrastructure. And until we get to the source of why that is, we can't come up with a solution. Why are we in the shape we're in? And we're in the shape we're in for a lot of different reasons. One of them is because we continue to be an economic colony to the rest of the region. And so until we address that, whatever we do, and I thought the most telling answer last night was to the very simple question, what happens to the village assets? What happens to the village debt? And the simple answer was, generally, you keep your debt and you give your assets to whatever municipality you become part of. What makes us think that's a good idea? Hempstead's major problem is that the county and the town have taken almost half of our tax base off of the tax roll. Now, if you can do something to put the 22 apartment buildings, now the new one on Manor Avenue in Fulton, 23, or the new one they did before that, so I think it's up to 24. If you
on Attorney Street.
On Attorney Street. If you put these properties back on the tax roll, or make the authority that took them off, i.e. the county and the town, pay their share of village and district taxes, we would have annual revenue, an increase of over $20 million. If we had an additional $20 million in tax revenue from the landlords that own these properties, believe it or not, we would have a better village. So the answer that Long Beach or Glen Cove gets an additional $1 million in sales tax revenue because they're a city, to me, shows very myopic thinking, very poor leadership, and very, very short-sightedness if we think we're going to do something and not deal with the hard political reality that as a village and as a school district, we need our leadership to go into court if necessary, to force the county and the town to put these apartment buildings back on the tax roll. That's what we need to do. And then if we want to dissolve, consolidate, whatever, we can do that. But then we need to look at it in terms of, well, what else does this law allow us to do? Can we create our own town? What can we do that will, in the long run, stabilize our village and make it a benefit to live here? Right now, we have increased, I think almost half of our homes are now owner-occupied. At one point in the 90s, we had fewer than a third of our residential properties as owner-occupied. But the bottom line is those of us that are renting at market rate or living in homes that we own or that are running small businesses that are not connected to large chains. We are paying the taxes of the landlords and the property owners of these properties with abated taxes. That's where our fight is, in my opinion. That, you know, nobody wants to talk about. It's like we just accept that. And there is no place in federal law that allows a municipality at the county or town to define economic development, which is what the pilots are supposed to stimulate. There's no formula where apartment buildings benefit the economy of a village. They place the most demand: fire, trash, sewage, and schools. And apartment buildings. If you abate a business, like why isn't Shipment getting an abatement? Why doesn't Roadrunner, the little restaurant, have an abatement? These people are paying $20,000 and $30,000 a year in property taxes. But the owner of 100 Terrace Avenue pays less taxes than they do? Something's wrong. And unless we address it, and it's not saying we don't want subsidized housing, we don't want the poor. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we can't be the dumping ground for the county and the town. They cannot do anything by federal regulation that increases concentrations of segregation or poverty. And in both cases, so what we have is a situation where a family who does need, and we don't mind, you have subsidized rent. Okay, you live at 100 Terrace. But as you grow, because as you grow, you become more economically sound. What's happening right now, and I have 3 families that are ready to testify to this. They raise their children on Terrace Avenue. When they worked, they paid more. When they were unemployed, they paid less rent because it's based on your income. But once these women, because these are all single mothers, became more economically stable and their children grew up, that's an economic process. That's what happens. Then the market rate rent $2,000. So you move out of Terrace Avenue. But they couldn't find housing here in Hempstead. They live in Amityville and Farmingdale now with their median income or above salaries. And those apartments have been replaced by residents from Manhasset, Great Neck, Freeport, Long Beach, and Glencoe. So they're sending their poor here, and our economically stable families are being forced to go to other communities. That is economic genocide. And until we become politically astute enough to really address that across race, culture, and economic class, what tends to happen with oppressed people is we're looking at the Spanish people, blaming them, or we're looking at the poor, blaming them. Our battle is with the moneyed interests that would allow Tom Swazi to take a political contribution from Mo. That was our last battle. To take a political contribution from Mo and get letters from the state to endorse building additional housing. That is very lucrative real estate there. Why not convert that into affordable home ownership programs and help those families that are living in subsidized housing, but they're making that transition into mainstream economics, transition into housing that will contribute to the tax base. That's an economic plan. So what I see last night and this effort by this civic association as really amounting to is trying to give us a shortcut. We need to elect better leadership. We need to invest more soundly in studying the condition of the problem and really making an effort to build the political strength and the legal war chest to take on the town and the county and get our money back. And I'm sure both the Constitution or the Charter at the county and the town level, as well as the federal government, does not support the practices that have been done in Hempstead. They're unconstitutional and they're illegal. And if we would just come together, if we could get our village and school district to use some of our resources to really build our legal case, I think we would win. So let's not dissolve the village until we elect better leadership that really represent the best interests of the people.
I think it would take that long anyway, at least 2 years with getting the petition signed and everything before the village would actually be dissolved. And at that time, it would be time to re-elect someone new. I think we had like 1,800 voters come out and vote last time, and then we only had 60 people that appeared last night for something of this magnitude. We need to become rededicated and recommitted to for the best interests of our community.
I agree with that, but I've never been one for big crowds. I think that every one of us have a right to have our rights respected. If I'm the only one demanding my right to equal justice, and by law I have that right, I don't think we need every, 100,000 residents of the village there saying the same thing. The second thing is, which was very interesting about this whole process, the process on its face presupposes that you've done the study to say this is a good idea. And the fact that that has completely escaped everyone is scary. So if you don't have, the way they described the process to us last night is once you have the petition, you get the referendum, you have a vote that says yes, dissolve. Your village board develops the plan, but you're now developing a plan without a study. You have 120 days. That's not a long time. So if you don't have people elected to office who develop a plan that is in the best interest of the people, I mean, if the idea is that you get all of our assets and we keep all of our debt, why wouldn't the town say, yeah, come on and be part of this? Why wouldn't they? They already take all our assets. We're already in that relationship. So I think that, we have to be careful. Do I think we need to be more politically savvy in terms of developing a constituency that stays together throughout and not simply for elections? Yes, I do. I think that's our biggest problem. And I think that we get too caught up with the party politics. I don't think the Democratic or Republican Party has served the village of Hempstead well. I don't, so to say that we're going to rely on that for either one, I think the Hempstead village needs to evolve a political leadership that's indigenous, that's generic, and that really understands that their lot is tied to the lot of the community. We right now think that the economic distinctions between us, insulate us from certain things. And what we're finding out is that it doesn't. So I think that's where we have to begin. Understanding, black, white, Hispanic, Caribbean, whatever, rich, poor, renter, landowner, roomer, we all need to come together and understand that the mutual interest in this village, and our single cry needs to be, restore our tax base. We don't need to fight about it, restore our tax base. Everybody that runs, restore our tax base. That is the only way we are going to survive. And if they're not going to restore our tax base, then we need to be galvanized politically so that wherever we end up, that we're not, because right now we're simply set up to be an economic colony forever. And that's what our problem is, in my opinion. If you agree, write us and tell us. Develop in the village. You cannot develop out of a $22 million hole. I don't care how many new stores you put down there. I don't care how many restaurants. I don't care what you do. If we don't get these apartment builders back on our tax roll and make these landlords contribute to the infrastructure that they are helping to deteriorate quite rapidly, we can't win. Period. I don't care who you bring in here. We can't win. And whether there's the county exec or the town supervisor or whoever really want to help us in this economic situation, they're not going to do it unless they're ordered to do it by the court. We have to go to court. That's it. Okay? Okay. That the residents within the predominantly minority communities were being denied the protection of their constitutional right of franchise. So these redistricting lines are supposed to be done in such a way as to solidify the voting strength of communities like Hempstead within the legislative boundaries. They're not supposed to be drawn so that more Democrats or Republicans can get elected. They're supposed to be drawn so that the interests of those residents and communities, and they turn it into a minority thing. But white people live in Hempstead. It wasn't just the black people that was being denied constitutional protection. So it's what happened so that districts 1 and 2, there's a reason that we were districts 1 and 2. The whole government was restructured because the residents in the original districts 1 and 2 were not protected constitutionally. And the same with the town. So now to re-articulate that as a war between Democrats and Republicans is just wrong. And our political leadership, whether they're Republican or Democrat, to buy into it, it's wrong. And that's why we're in the shape we're in. And the last point is, one of the reasons that the residents don't come out to these meetings and are so, is because we work in 2 and 3 jobs to pay our taxes. Because Mo ain't paying his. That's what it is. The wealthy, the rich that don't live here, in the Hamptons, in Great Neck, on the shore, all that own this property, aren't paying their taxes. So we have to work 2 and 3 jobs so that we can. And we pay these additional taxes for less services. Period. So let's fix that.